InfoPlus for genuine information.
Sponsored by
CEC, Canadian Education Council. Brighter tomorrow starts today.
DAV for life.
InfoPlus for genuine information.
Namaste and welcome to InfoPlus, a diplomat series. I'm the host Rebecca Shetri. Today we are pleased to host His Excellency Udo Eugen Volz, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Nepal. From diplomacy to partnership, let's explore Germany to Nepal ties through this journey. Excellency, Namaste, Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, welcome.
Thank you so much for welcoming us here at German Embassy.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Nepal and Germany share a warm and long-standing relationship that began in 1958, rooted in mutual respect and meaningful cooperation.
When I came here for the first time to have an interview with the former ambassador of Germany, he had shown me this tree. Does this tree has a very special history?
It has a very special history because relations between states are not only the direct project to do the cooperation, but it's also about visits sometimes.
Okay.
So this tree was planted almost 60 years ago in 1967. That was on the occasion of the visit of the Federal President of Germany, Mr. Lübke, to Nepal.
Okay.
So since then this tree has been here, it has been growing, and we also see a little plaque that has been put there to commemorate the occasion. So this was one of the important visits, 1967 from Germany. And then 20 years later, but we won't see a memory here, the Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Helmut Kohl, who had been Chancellor for a long time in Germany, it was like in the mid part of his terms, he came to visit and he went to visit Bhaktapur because German development cooperation in Bhaktapur had started in the mid-70s with restoring the old city, the cultural sites, the temples. And in 1987 he came also to, it was kind of almost a conclusion of that cooperation. And you will find a plaque in Durbar Square in Bhaktapur commemorating his visit at the time. So we have these two locations which are a bit of symbolic for our relationship from 1967 this, and the other one in Bhaktapur in 1987.
Very beautiful, and it carries a very long history together.
Yes. And I think a tree is always a beautiful symbol because, you know, it continues growing, it expands. And so I hope it will be here.
As our relationship is growing every year since 1958. Yeah, very nice.
Germany has been trusted partner of Nepal, contributing to important areas such as renewable energy, sustainable development, climate action, and education. carrying this strong partnership forward today is His Excellency Udo Eugen Volz, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Nepal.
Your Excellency, when I went through your biography, I found it so interesting. Did you had dream to involve yourself in diplomacy since the starting of your career?
Well, it only came to me very late, to be honest. When I was a teenager, I would have preferred to become a professional football player. It was much of an idea. Or later on, I was a teacher, but then I studied economics. And later, in the later stage of my studies, there was a visit of the head of the diplomatic academy to my university. And he made a presentation. And for some reason, I can't remember exactly why, I went there to see what he was going to tell us about this profession I had no idea about, because I didn't know anybody who was in diplomacy. So I went there and I listened to it. And what really caught me was that he was not just saying, this is a fancy job, you're going to travel the world, it's going to be all beautiful, and this is the best thing you can ever do. He was saying, yes, this profession has wonderful sides to it, you get to meet many people, to explore a number of countries. You'll be close to politics, but you won't be a politician, But at the same time, he also said what the challenges are usually, that after a few years you leave a place completely, you go to a new place, you start again, you will probably have a family, kids will have to change schools, they may not be happy to go away from one school. The partner has to find his own way of dealing with this profession, because for partners it's quite difficult, because when we come to a new country, I go to the embassy to work, but my wife has to find her life. She's not going to a certain place she knows to work. So this presentation at the time really caught me, because I found it so interesting, but also in a way honest, not hiding what may become an issue in the future. And then, you go through the process. I applied, and there was first a written exam you had to take. Then you had to wait for the results, and in the end you get this call, and they say, yes, you're invited to the oral exam. And then I traveled to Bonn at the time, which was the capital in the 90s still, and I took the oral exam at the diplomatic academy. And then at the time you knew, this is already a smaller group, and you get to meet all these other people who are in this competition, so to speak. And then in the end, I was very happy when I got this call, and they said, you're in and you can start in the next spring to do the training. And
that must be the happiest moment when you received.
I was very happy, I was very proud. Because also, I come from a background, I was the first in family to go to higher education.
Seasoned diplomat with decades of experience, Ambassador Volz has been actively working to further strengthen Nepal to Germany relations since taking up his post in Kathmandu. Today, we are delighted to welcome His Excellency Udo Eugen Volz to discuss bilateral cooperation and a shared vision for the future.
Christmas is usually 24th of December, and then the 4 Sundays before Christmas, you light a candle. So on the first Sunday of what we call the Advent, time of Advent, we light 1 candle. Second Sunday, we light 2, then third 3, and then 4. So once Christmas comes, Christmas Eve, all 4 candles are burning.
That's so meaningful.
Yeah, so this is really, because for us, for you it's the festival of light that you have in yours. For us, in a way, is also Christmas, because Christmas for us is the light of the Messiahs that came and brought again light to the earth in winter in our region at least. So this is like it's growing, you know, from Sunday to Sunday. It's more lights, and then by Christmas you got them all on, and you get them in different materials, but it's always the 4 candles usually that you have for the 4 Sundays of Advent.
InfoPlus for genuine information.
Your Excellency, Namaste and Guten Abend. Welcome to the show InfoPlus on Himalayan Television, a first diplomat series which has been running since 23 years.
Guten Abend, Namaste. Thank you for having me, especially with such a long history of productions that you have been doing in this field.
And I believe, Your Excellency, this must be your first interview with the television and with the Himalayan television after you took your credentials here in Nepal.
That's correct, yes. I'm happy that in this context we can have this interview, yes.
Your Excellency, let me start our conversation on a personal note. Since taking up a role here in Nepal, what moments or experiences have left the strongest impression on you?
Well, in these now 6 months, I think it's been everything around Kathmandu, because I haven't been out really out of Kathmandu except for once. So it's been exploring more the city, and the single moment is more this daily experience of how life is happening here, what people are doing in their everyday life, how they move around, the early morning, going to the temples, the visits. This is something that is has a very strong, I would say, impact, because it's very powerful and very calm at the same time.
You are in this field since a very long time, and your journey seems to be very interesting, Your Excellency. Could you share a bit about your journey and your experiences in diplomacy?
It has been a long journey indeed. It's been 35 years plus now with the Foreign Service, and I started off in the early 90s in West Africa, in Ghana, because at the time I had quite a longing, kind of, because I had been to Africa up to a time, and so I asked for a posting, and they were happy to do that. So I spent my first posting in Ghana, West Africa, and then back to Bonn, which at the time was still the capital. And it was very strong experience, because in our profession you say the first posting usually leaves a very strong mark, because it's the first time that you really live abroad professionally. You know, it's especially when you move to a different continent, it's a different climate, people have a different background, culture, so almost everything was kind of new and different. You know? And then you make your first steps, you try to understand the country and how it works, and you explore it. So it's really, and I think I can confirm for myself as well, the first posting is quite special. Also, you realize afterwards every posting has its very own character. But whenever there's something in the news about Ghana, of course, I look what the news are saying, what's been happening in these many years. And then it just kind of developed bit by bit, and, you know, like very often in life, only looking back you understand where the red lines maybe had been, or the red thread, what has been in common. So later on, the first posting in Europe was in Spain, in Madrid, and this has a special memory for me because our 2 children were born in Madrid. So this has been a life-changing phase in a way, because when you become a family, it's very different.
Sure.
And then also a new language, then at the time Spanish, and working in a more maybe familiar but still different environment. Then later on it became a bit, what we might say, a bit more exotic. I mean, being in Libya at the time, in a Arab-speaking Muslim country, it's completely different. Again, traditions, lifestyle, climate again, very hot in the summers, rather cool in the winters. And then going back again, we went forth and back with Berlin also, which was good for the children to have an experience in where they come from, kind of, from Germany. And then later on to Cuba, which is a very special place, I would say, very, very dear to us, the Cubans. People on an island usually have very strong their own character and experience.
True.
And Cuba has a long experience of a very own setting, their revolution and everything that came after 1959. And you can still see a lot of this history and memory in everyday life. It's still very strong. Also, the economy has been struggling very hard, and it's been not an easy task.
Sounds very inspiring and interesting.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. You have had a long and distinguished diplomatic career, Your Excellency. How has a professional journey shaped your approach in representing Germany here in Nepal?
I would say it's of course a matter of experience that you gain through exposure, because also in the countries you realize that there's a certain image about Germany, which a number of those are rather continuous and hardly earned, maybe also, or hard earned by the Germans for certain reasons, and other things have been changing over time. So if we look at the cliche things about Germany, it's the German cars, German autobahns that people would like to drive on. It's the Oktoberfest and the tradition to have beer festivals and drink beers. Football, of course, is a big topic, because Germany always had been fighting in the upper league, so to speak, sometimes less, but it's been a strong aspect of our image, I would say, also at the same time. And I hope also that Germany is being seen as a country which has managed a transition after the Second World War to become a stable democracy.
Living in Nepal offers perspectives beyond diplomacy. What has the country taught you personally so far?
It has taught me that a population can even much more diverse than the German population, because the diversity of the cultural diversity, the languages that you have, the different settings, landscapes where people have arranged to make a living and to spend their lives. So I think this diversity is quite visible, I would say, and it's very positive that this has brought people together in the end, and to be tolerant, and be it socially but also especially religiously. That's what I learned very early, that there's a lot of tolerance around because of this very diverse backgrounds that people have.
You arrived in Nepal in August, Your Excellency. Have you been able to visit different places in Nepal after arrival? And if you have to pick one, which one would you pick?
Which one would I pick? Well, as I said, I've been exposed mainly to Kathmandu. I did a trip to Pokhara, which was a very nice place to visit, closer to the mountains, which are on my list to visit more closely than from Pokhara. And around Kathmandu, so I think still Bodha. I find Bodha a very special place also, because for me it has quite a calm, a serene character. And it's just how many meters? 50 meters away from a very bustling, very busy main road. You know? And then you just make this short transition, and it lays out before you, and you do your tours around and have a look. And that's, I think it's also this contrast of the atmosphere when you get in and out of that place.
Germany and Nepal, we share a very long history together since 1958, and we share a very long-standing and trusted partnership since a very long time. How would you describe the evolution of this relationship over the decades?
Indeed, it goes back such a long time, which sometimes we're not even aware, but it is. Sometimes certain dates come up, and then you realize the length of time that you have been working together, in this case between two countries. So last year, the German Development Cooperation Implementing Agency, GIZ, celebrated 50 years in Nepal. And the financing agency, KfW, has been here over 60 years. So this is, I think this is the landmark cooperation, the area of development cooperation. And we have been focusing on a limited number of areas, which has been in the recent decade mainly energy, and then health, and a sustainable economic development in various areas. I mean, small business, agriculture. So this has been an important issue, an important aspect, or the most important in our cooperation, I think. But also education, There has been a number of people who have studied in Germany, even in early times, up to now, through their own means or through scholarships. So there's also a community of people who have lived and worked in Germany who have come back, especially academics, but also other people who are also kind of building a bridge with their experience in Germany and then coming home to Nepal.
Yes, exactly. And we have a collaboration in so many different ways, Germany, Nepal. And Germany has been also one of the Nepal's important development partners since a very long time. Which areas of cooperation do you think have created the most meaningful and lasting impact?
I think this is very easy to say. There's one word for it, which is Bhaktapur. I only learned it also coming here, or preparing for here, that this has been a very unusual format and dimension also of cooperation project. I think it is one of the biggest that Germany has made altogether. And it's beautiful to see that it was kind of an organic thing, because it started off with the German government's commitment to reconstruct one of the temples in Bhaktapur, because all had still been devastated mostly by the earthquake in 1934. And then it just went on. There was another one, and then they had more projects. And then it went beyond this, let's say, restoration of cultural and religious temples and buildings, and it became an infrastructure project also. So water supply, sewage, so it became like a comprehensive development plan for the area of Durbar Square in Bhaktapur, and I think people are aware of this very strong German support. It's been more than 10 years, almost 15 years that this had been growing and extending, and then it came to a kind of conclusion. And I think this is something that's really worthwhile keeping in mind, that project, and of course the cooperation between the Nepalese and the Germans, how they managed to do all that work.
That sounds so interesting, and very good initiatives from both the countries together.
Yeah, I think we're very happy and very proud that this has worked well, and it was a good cooperation, and it was successful. And this is not always the case in every project you do around the world.
Germany is also very globally recognized for its leadership in renewable energy and climate action. How do you think, how is Germany supporting Nepal's green transactions and climate resilience?
Yeah, to start off, I would say Nepal is blessed with a huge potential for renewables, which other countries don't have. So I think it's really a very positive feature. And it has been part of our cooperation very early with the hydropower that we have been supporting and implementing. So the production of electricity through hydropower, that was like the first phase that we were engaged in. And then it moved to transmission, because usually where you produce the energy is not the place where you need it or consume it. So transmission was the next topic, and then currently we are in the phase of distribution, which means you bring electricity to a certain area, and then it goes to the consumers and households, companies, production sites. So it has been quite a long road we have traveled together on renewables. And as I said, this is very fortunate for Nepal to have this potential, to exploit it to the benefit of the country. And there is more. I mean, you don't only have water, but you also have solar. You have the sun. We've got quite sunny country in that sense. So you have also a good potential, which is now slowly started to be used and exploited as well.
So is there any agreement in the pipeline, Your Excellency, for new projects?
We just, not just, a few months ago in October, we signed the new agreements for the technical and financial cooperation for the next 2 years, because we have a rhythm of 2 years in our development cooperation. So then in December, we had the first round, the first step of the next round, which we call the consultations. So the government meets, the two governments meet, and then they discuss where do we stand in our projects, what's working well, anything to adapt, and maybe where do we want to go. So for the time being, we are quite stable with the 3 sectors I mentioned, which is energy, health, and the sustainable economic development. So it's more at the moment more of a fine tuning than to start a completely new field, because energy is ongoing. Health, we will stay in there for a few more years as well. And so it's not like a big new thing coming up, but we're just being very solid in what we're doing to extend it and to continue.
And I believe we can see lots of good changes during your tenure here in Nepal.
Yes, I hope so too. No, not maybe the reason being for it, but I mean, I think things are in the pipe and they are working, and then we just try to take it step by step in the various areas, together with Nepal and in like energy, also with some other international partners, because energy it's a huge task and it's a huge sector to develop.
Yes. And Nepal has huge, rich resources, isn't it?
Especially in producing energy and electricity, yes, definitely.
Your Excellency, infrastructure development, technical support, and capacity buildings are the key pillars and strong pillars of German supports. How do you think these initiatives contribute to Nepal's long-term development goal?
Yes, I do believe they do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be engaged in them and to continue with it. As I said, energy is a very big topic, because usually in most countries there is a struggle how to produce it, where to find the right means. There has been a huge discussion in developed countries about nuclear power, renewable power, gas, oil. And now you come to Nepal and you have this wonderful potential of renewables being in place, so you don't have to worry about other sources at the moment. Of course, there's still fuel coming in, but over time I think there will be more replacement also through the EVs, I mean electric vehicles that have become much more popular in Nepal for good reasons, I think. So this production, and probably also in the future even increased production of electricity from renewable sources, will give more opportunities for a environment-friendly development of consumption also, I would say. If you look at the cars, then the famous issue also about cooking, there's traditional ways of cooking, there's the more, what we call it, contemporary, which is based on electricity. I think that transition is still ongoing also in Nepal. People have to learn about it and take it on and like it also in a way, a different way of doing it. But I think that's important, that's also part of accompanying these policies and the projects also in the different sectors. And also, you know, Europe, Germany, we have developed earlier, but we also have seen earlier the conflicts, you know, development, infrastructure, more buildings, and then you have to reconcile with your natural environment that you also want to have. You know. I think that's also an issue in every country nowadays with climate change. We have the impacts in different ways and forms, but we all have impacts of climate change. So to be aware that it's not only one-sided development in certain topics, but you have to see the global picture, and I think you do in Nepal. I think you are aware that the mountains, the Himalayas, it's not given that it's going to be staying the same forever. We have the issues about glacial changes. So I think we also hope that we can help taking these aspects into account as the country moves forward in its economic development.
As I mentioned, climate change, that's true. It has been an happening issue all over the world right now. So do we have any plans to work together for this issue here in Nepal?
Yeah, we do work also with environmental organizations who take care of wildlife interest, wildlife human conflicts, because that's also an issue when you go into environmental protection. It's also not in an isolated place somewhere. It is where people live, you know. And also from my previous posting in Africa, where you see it's different animals, but it's the same topic, that the human environment is expanding, human structures, and then you get into this human-wildlife conflicts, and you have to find ways and means to reconcile, as I said. And this is also part of activities that we do support, because Nepal is not only famous for its mountains and landscapes, but also for the tigers and the leopards and the rhinos. And I think there is a common interest to protect them but also to make it feasible for the people who are living very close to nature and these animals.
True. Excellency, education and vocational training are core strength of Germany. How can German expertise help create better skills, jobs and opportunities for Nepalese youth?
A very important topic. As we can see on the statistics, your country has a very young population. The youth is the biggest part of your population. And it's vice versa in Germany. It's the opposite in Germany. Our society is getting older and we lack a certain number of young people who come to the labor market where we need people to come in. So what we follow and try to implement is the idea of a circular migration, because there are people in Nepal and other countries also where they need jobs and they are not immediately available in the near future in the country. So some will still want to go abroad to work, to be trained, educated, gain professional experience, and then at some stage probably go back to Nepal and apply what you have learned and earned at home. So I think this would be the win-win of circular. You know, people come to Germany, they work, they get trained, they go back, and you have a bit of a continuous process. That's what the model, I think, looks like. And it has started, because we see definitely much more interest by young Nepalese to come to Germany for work, for training, to study.
And also cultural diplomacy is also an important part of Germany's global engagement. How does the Goethe Institute contribute to strengthening people-to-people ties between Germany and Nepal?
Well, the Goethe Center Kathmandu is one of the most important, of course, places to go to learn German. And it's also the place where you can take German language exams, which is very important. And they also have seen quite an increase, and they also trying to grow, and to grow also their offer to meet the demand, but this is still a bit lagging behind, which is easy to understand. If you're an institution, suddenly demand grows quickly, so you try to follow up with that. But they also have a certain tradition of organizing cultural events, and I think this will again be seen later in the year. At the moment, they're just preparing a transition to new facilities, to a new building, so they're very busy with that process. And I think once they have settled in the new building, we will also see more and hear more about their cultural activities.
Okay. Very interesting. Your Excellency, through Goethe Institute program in language learning, arts, culture, and academic actions, many Nepalese youth are engaging with Germany. How important is the cultural connection in modern diplomacy?
I think the cultural connection is very important, and if we didn't know beforehand, it was always important, I think, because the cultural aspect brings people together. And this is where people also learn, because you enter a new country and the culture is different usually to varying degree, but it is. And then you learn more about the country, and the language usually is a very good key to open that door, you know, because the language also transports kind of attitudes, ideas that are predominant, a certain way of life sometimes, because sometimes you talk about a country and you say, this is the way they live, you know, this is how the people live in that country, this is what the main features of how they go about in their lives, which depends on a lot of factors sometimes. It's the climate. I mean, if you have a winter, it's a different life that you lead compared to a summertime. And if a country kind of has only one season across the year, it also changes the way you live and your culture. So I think language and culture are very closely connected, and this is why I think it's always useful to have the opportunity to approach a country through language. Yes. And we think that the Goethe Center here is especially offering this kind of access to Germany.
Yes, and this kind of connections makes us very connected with each other, though we are far beyond, isn't it?
It is, yes.
At a time of global uncertainty and shifting geopolitics, how important is international cooperation between countries like Germany and Nepal?
against the background that you have been describing of that we feel there's a bit of rather disorder in the world's organization and the cooperation, it's even more important to rely on partners that you trust, I would say, that you have a lot of in common with, and that you can pursue common interest. And it doesn't matter how far you are geographically, I think. So that's why I think also Germany and Nepal have never had any issues in that sense with each other. And the democracy process in Nepal has been bringing us together even more closely, pursuing the same idea of democracy, of people's participation, civil society. So I think in all times, but yeah, especially in these very trying times, it's important to see who are the partners you can work with in what areas.
Since you have a long history in this field, Your Excellency, have you faced challenges ever?
Have I faced challenges ever? Yeah.
Would you like to share a few of them?
The thing is that every new posting in a way is a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, because as I said, you go to a country you usually haven't been living in. I have never lived in any of the countries when I got to serve my duty. And then it's just this, because you leave behind kind of almost everything and everyone. You know, you get a very fresh start, which is on the one hand nice because it's like an empty sheet, you know, it's all white and it's going to start slowly filling up with all the experiences that you make. And sometimes you're still stuck a bit in what you have left behind because it has been maybe very, very emotional, very personal, also beyond work, because we don't only go to country to work, we also live and we make friends and acquaintances and we try new things. And this is sometimes very much forward-looking and encouraging. And sometimes you get a bit nostalgic about what you have lived before, what you have seen. And then, so you go through certain moods also at times. And usually in the beginning, you still have very vivid impressions from the last few weeks, months. So I would say the stronger challenge is when you move from one foreign country to the next. You know, when I'm back home in Berlin, which I know, and I go to a posting, I know that I will go back to Berlin at some stage, you know. So what I leave behind is something, I don't leave it behind in the same way because it's still there for me and I know I will go back, I will go and visit and it's different. But then moving from one country to the next, you know, probably for a longer period you will not go back to the country you have left behind. You will now focus on the new one and you may never go back to the other country, you don't know. You know, so it's much more uncertain what becomes out of what you have experienced and the friendships you have made and all that in that country that you just have left behind, kind of. You know. So that's I realized is quite a difference. If you go abroad or to a new posting from Germany, from home, so to speak, or you go from a second home in another country to a third country. You know,
that's a huge challenge because you get connected with everyone and all of a sudden you have to go back.
And this is the beauty and the difficulty. And the second thing that we have noted is, my wife and I, that when the kids have left home and you go to a new posting without them, there's something, again, different. You know, usually through school, you get into, I at least did, through all the life when the children were in school, I was always somehow involved in the school, parents' associations, the board of the school in one stage. So I always liked school as a place where you meet people, and I think that school is such a important part of your life and shaping you so much. You know, the subjects that you learn, the friends you have, your classmates, the teachers. It's, I think, for a young person, a child, a teenager, it's very much an important time. So I always love to be and see where my kids go to school and what's happening in the school. And now you go to a new posting and this whole part of life is not there because you don't have any school to attend or to go to see what's happening there. So this is our really the first posting that we have started without our sons or one of them being around.
Okay. And what is the best part that you have learned in your life so far?
The best part is it's always about people and you meet people everywhere, I would say, yes.
Okay. Your Excellency, you had mentioned about youth here in Nepal. Recently, the Gen Z protests have drawn attention to youth frustration and demands for change. And how do you interpret this moment in the context of Nepal's upcoming election and democratic process? Do you have any suggestions or feedbacks? Because we have a very long relationship together since 1958.
I would say that what has been happening in September, especially 8, 9 of September and the days after, and since then, it's what I would say in different forms. We see it in all the democracies, that democracy also raises expectations because, as I said, people's participation, involvement, democratic leadership, human rights, civil rights protection, it's an important framework for life. And then things happen and change, and at certain times you realize, we have maybe lost track of certain ideas and important issues, And this is what I would call a moment of democratic renewal, that you realize that something has to be taken into account again, has to be more prominent, and that the people's requests have to be taken into account maybe differently or more strongly. And I think this is the case. What has happened is going on in Nepal, that now people are expecting this, after the elections that are coming up, all that has been brought forward, what people care about and want to see happening, which they have been missing, then will be taken up by the future government. So I think there's quite an expectation now that this, again, is not a chapter that has been closed, but that rather these last few months will have an impact and will also shape the country's direction and also the next government's program, so to say, what to do for the benefit of the people, which is always the main task of governments. At least as we also see it, that the government takes care of the needs of the people. And we have seen in Germany early elections last year because the coalition that was governing before had lost the majority. And people were also having expectations, or still having, on this new government, because we also have a need of reforms, of adapting to changing situations, of reconsidering earlier decisions. Democracy is not like, you put it there and it's always fine and forever. You always have to look at it closely, and then sometimes you find out that things have to be corrected and go back to the source again sometimes and see what is the basic principles, what is it now, does it takes now to do the next step in the work of democracy and in what I would say the service of the government to the people.
That's a good suggestion, I say. Finally, on a personal note, Your Excellency, what motivates you the most as a German ambassador to Nepal, and what message would you like to share with the people of Nepal?
First of all, I would like to say that I'm very grateful for what I have found existing between Germany and Nepal over so many decades, between the governments, between the people. And this is the most important, I think. So there's a very solid basis. I mentioned before, we haven't had really any conflict between our countries, or very diverging views. So we have been moving ahead in this cooperation work in other areas. So there's a very good platform to continue. And if there's one thing that I would see that will go beyond my term for sure, but I think which is important, that development cooperation will also have a more impact or see more contribution by private sector in the country, but also between the private sectors in our two countries. I think this is something that we think is important. And Nepal's graduation from LDC to the next level also is an indicator that development and the economic development has worked in the country. And it's also a challenge because it says now, you have grown out of a certain category, and it opens new doors, but it also is a bit more challenging. Like in school, you go to college, and it's a different expectation, and you have qualified for other topics. So I think this is, what lies ahead probably, and also affecting our cooperation, but also the whole economic development of Nepal. And it's not, it's not given how you manage this. I think this is quite something. And also, all countries, again, like in democracy, also in the economy, sometimes you have to re-evaluate and see what are the potentials that you want to look for, you haven't been using, other things you rather would leave behind because this kind of it's kind of outdated now. So certain like sectors come and disappear sometimes, certain sectors of economy. So yeah, I think in this area there will be a lot. And the other one I think is this, what is called this circular migration. I think that we will probably see more of this. And we want to make sure that this is done in a good manner, in the interest of those people who want to migrate and want to work, that it's done in a no kind of exploitation, or that people really can go there securely and feel safe in the transition they make from their country to another country to go to work, and that being a good experience and a learning experience, but especially a good one that they will look at and say, yes, it was a good decision to do that.
That was a very interesting conversation with Your Excellency, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And we wish you all the best for the good work here in Nepal during your tenure. Thank you so much, and namaste.
Namaste. And I would like to thank you for your interest in Germany's role as a partner to Nepal and our work in Nepal. Because it's important also for us that people know that we are here, what we are doing and why we are doing it. Thank you again for this opportunity.
InfoPlus, for genuine information.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a thoughtful and engaging conversation. And for our viewers, thank you for watching InfoPlus. I'm Rebecca Chetri. See you again next time. Namaste.
InfoPlus, for genuine information.